Welcome back, friends. This is the first installment of tournament meta results for the week of December 2nd. This is hopefully the first in an ongoing series of videos I'm going to do looking at the meta results for the previous week in Warhammer 40k. We're also going to be touching on the winners and losers in each category. We'll take a look at a couple specific factions, some that are doing well and some that are doing poorly, and we'll take a look at the overall meta of the current data slate. So stick around and we'll get right into it. For the previous week, we have the player numbers here. We have the number of players that participated in tournaments last week at 743, number of games played at 3,676, and the number of tournaments at 16. The first thing we're going to look at is Army win percentage for the previous week. You can see at the top of the chart, we have the Genestealer cults at 64% win rate, and we had the melee-focused Space Marine armies doing pretty well with Blood Angels and Black Templars both at 56%, and Space Wolves at a decent 53%. We had some struggling armies at the bottom as also Space Marines, which is not uncommon at that 38%, and Grey Knights, which is weird to see because they were pretty successful last data slate, sitting at 33%. Next thing we're going to look at here is the Army Representation. This is a percentage of player base, so this is the amount of people playing each army. The average should be 3.8%. So we can see at the very top here we have a few armies that are getting heavy play throughout the tournament scene. Tyranids at 7.4 are almost double the average of representation. Necrons are at 6.9%, and Guard are sitting at about 6.1%. These are all being played extremely high amounts. You're gonna, if you go to a tournament, you're most likely going to see one of these three armies when you line up at the table. Down at the bottom, we have the usual suspects of people who are, lower end of representation. Imperial Agents, 0.5%, not uncommon for a new army, especially one that's as niche as them. And Black Templars, who are usually down at the bottom as well, looking at about 1.3%. So here we have the percentage of players who went X-0, X1 at a tournament, so players who didn't lose a game or only lost one game at a tournament. The average is above 15% throughout a data slate. We can see at the top of the chart here, Imperial Agents had an extremely strong showing from half their players. Half the people who showed up with Imperial Agents didn't lose a game or only lost one game in a tournament. Genestealer cults and Thousand Suns, not to anybody's surprise, we're both sitting at 38, 30, and 36% respectively, and in line with the win percentage that for Genestealer cults, showing that they're still dominating when they do play. And at the bottom of the chart here, we have Grey Knights at under 5%. They got run over last week. There's not many Grey Knight players seeing much success at all, and Drukhari sitting at 0%. Drukhari had a really rough week. No player that brought Drukhari to the table went X0 or X1 in any tournament, so they were either extremely mid or just getting run over themselves. So in this chart here, we have the win rates, X0, X1 percentage, and representation all put together. This chart gives us a better overall idea of how an army is doing, so we can compare all the statistics together. So at the top, we can see Imperial Agents. They were kind of feast or famine. They only had a 50% win rate, and they had a 50% X0, X1 percentage. So that means half their players were just dominating, the other half were just getting killed. So there's suggests that a few players either found a niche list that was very potent and won them a lot of games, or maybe it was something specific with the tournament. Also, Genestealer cults are just killing it all over the place. 64% win rate, almost 39% X0, X1 percentage, and an above average representation, which is kind of huge for Genestealer cults because they're always at the bottom. They're an expensive army, they're difficult to play, so it shows that if you have an army that is above average representation, way above average win percentage, and way above average X0, X1 percentage, that this army is just broken right now. At the bottom, we have Drukhari and Grey Knights. Grey Knights are really struggling since the last data slate. Win percentages last week was 33%. Representation is well below average. X0, X1 percentage is just abysmal. And Drukhari had much of the same, 41% win rate, 0 percentage on the X0, X1, and their army representation was way below average, almost double, almost half of what the average representation is, so they were just struggling last week. So now we're going to look at the tournament wins for each army last week. So we can see that Genestealer cults came in with another dominant week of 5 wins. which is not surprising based on the numbers we've already looked at. Sisters of Battle also had some success. They only had 3 tournament wins the previous rest of the edition, and they showed up with 3 this week, doubling their numbers, so that was pretty good for them. Next thing we're going to look at is the faction focus. So we're going to focus on an army that's doing extremely well, and that one this week is going to be the Genestealer cults. So the first thing we look at for Genestealer cults, which is the biggest thing out of the ordinary for me, is the army representation. You can see in October it was around 1.7, 1.9%, which is pretty much on average for their army. No matter how well they usually do, they're usually sitting right around there. They're a difficult to play army, and they're expensive, but it's one of those armies that if you know how to play them and you're an experienced player, you can get a lot out of them. But we can see in the next weeks coming, they've almost always increased in representation, which is scary for people who go into tournaments because there's more Genestealer cults there, and they're still finding success. Usually when you have more people playing an army, the win percentage and the XOX1 percentage will sort of level out a little bit, because you have people who are meta hopping and might not know how to play them and win properly with them, especially Genestealer cults, a difficult army. But the fact that they're still showing all this success is telling me that they're a very powerful and probably broken army. So next thing we're going to look at quickly is the sub-faction data. So, most people are playing the Biosanctic Brood Surge. Well, the Host of Ascension is the one that's seeing the highest win percentage, but Brood Surge is not that far behind at only 57 versus 63%. So they're finding ways to win with multiple sub-factions, which is not a lot of things that most armies actually get the luxury of. So next thing we're going to take a look at for them is the meta health rating. This is a stat I've been working on, and this shows the overall health of the army related to the current meta. So average is 100, meaning if they had a perfectly average win rate, XOX1, tournament wins, and army representation, you would be at 100. The idea is for everyone to be at 100, because then you have a perfectly balanced game. Obviously, that's not going to happen, so there's going to be some variations. So I've compared all their numbers to the average of the meta, and you can see those numbers down below, and my formula spits out a number that shows how high or how well they're performing or how low they're performing. Go down and look, they're almost 9% over the average win rate. Their army representation is still a little bit below average, but that has been climbing every week. Their XOX1 percentage is twice the average, which is insane, and their tournament wins is 3 times the average, which is also insane. So they're starting to show up in numbers, and they're just dominating. So the next we're going to look at is the Drukhari. This is an army that is starting to slip a little bit. So first thing we're going to take a look at is the army representation. Over the past 8 weeks, you can see that this army's representation is just gradually dwindling. They were almost around the meta average of about 3.8, but they're now down to 1.9. So as the army suffers, people are shifting off of them, and they're losing a lot of players just to the fact that they aren't as good as they used to be. Looking at the sub-faction data, we can see that Real Space Raiders is only sitting at 21% play rate, while Sky Splinter Assault is at almost 79% win rate, or play rate, sorry. So that's showing me that people are just hammering Sky Splinter almost every time they show up to the table. But if you look at the win percentage, Sky Splinter is only winning 41% of their games, and Real Space is winning 56% of their games. So this shows me that potentially the meta has shifted a little bit. Sky Splinter is not what it used to be, and there might be some play within Real Space Raiders. So it might take the army, or might take the players playing the army who stick with it some time to shift to the new meta, and we should hopefully see some of these numbers even out in the next coming weeks as people find their place in the new meta. And if you look at their meta health rating, it's sitting at about 87.4, which is not great, but it's not the worst. But these numbers have been slowly declining every week, and hopefully we can see them bounce back a little bit if they can find some play with Real Space Raiders and get some more wins, get some more XOX1 percentage, and maybe bring a few people back to the faction, and I can bump those numbers back up to where they should be, right around 100. Their win rate for the Dataslate is just a little bit below average. Armor representation is it's quite a bit below average. XOX1 is right about average, and tournament wins is about half. So that's where all those numbers combine based on my formula, and you're going to get 87%. So they're struggling, but they're not in a really bad spot, but hopefully that can turn around in the next couple weeks. All right, and the last couple things we're going to look at is the current data slate. So we're going to look at the win percentages here. Genestealer Cults is the only army really dominating across this whole data slate with almost a 59% win rate, which is actually really good, because if we look at the rest of the armies, we have mostly green bars sitting between that GW accepted range of 45 to 55%. The only ones who seem to be kind of struggling is Dark Angels and Space Marines. They're down quite low. They're still just below the average, but they're doing the worst out of all of them. Imperial Agents are doing bad as well, but they're still a new army, so that takes, you kind of exclude them. They have so few players. They need some time to work their way in and for people to figure everything out. And now we have tournament wins for the entire data slate, and this is broken down week by week. So each color in the bar represents a specific week and how many tournaments they won that week. So if we look at Genestealer Cults and Guard, they are sitting at 14 and 15 tournament wins respectively. So you can see Genestealers made a huge jump there last week as they won 5 in the last week. So their blue bar, their week 7 bar, is quite large. And if you actually look at it for all the tournaments that have been played, Guard and Astra Militarum are winning 25% of all tournaments right now, which is a crazy high amount. So all armies actually have at least one win. Well, all real armies have at least one win. Imperial Agents still sitting at 0, but, you know, they haven't found their place yet. But even Adeptus Mechanicus, who has been struggling, has that one tournament win, and everyone else has at least 2. So it's not perfect. You'd like to see some distribution from the high down to the low, maybe spread that a little bit, but overall, we're seeing a widespread of armies winning majority of tournaments, which is good to see. And that's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps support the channel. If you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see, or what you did like or what you didn't like, or what you want to see more of, please let me know in the comments so I can continue to shape these to give you guys what you want to hear and what you want to see, and improve the content every week. If you want to check out these charts that I've been showing you, you can visit my website, warpfriends.wordpress.com. The link will be in the description. This has all the charts you can see, and it's updated weekly with the new data once it's released. So thanks again for your time, and I'll see you next time.